Hi guys, it's Rob from Royal Balls. We've got another clutch to look at today. A fairly simple pairing, a Savannah or cinnamon Mojave to a fire clown, and the idea here is to get cinnamon het clowns so that we can get cinnamon into our clown projects. Let's take a look at the parents and then we'll have a look at the clutch. Alright guys, as usual we'll start with the parents. This is a cinnamon Mojave or Savannah female, the biggest of my ball pythons. You can see she hasn't fully recovered yet from laying the eggs. She used to be over 4 kilos, but she is a Savannah or cinnamon Mojave, and again this clutch is all about getting extra genes into our clown project. So we wanted cinnamon, which is a dark gene, into the clown, so I had to make Hets. So this is the female that I chose, and cinnamon, you can see, is quite dark, but this is also Mojave, and Mojave tends to make the alien heads run together in the Savannah. This would be a typical Mojave pattern with floating alien heads here. We don't get a particularly strong dorsal stripe at the top, but at the base around the tail we do. So that is cinnamon Mojave, and she was paired to this guy, which is a fire clown. This is just fire. There's no pastel in this, but it's a particularly nice light coloured fire. Now fire's a brightening gene and also a reducing gene. You can see that in the difference between these two animals. So we've got cinnamon Mojave both dark, and we've got fire which is light, and you can see the typical clown pattern. So everything's going to be het for clown. If you have a look at the head stamp on this guy here, you can see the typical fire clown head stamp. He actually has quite a nice cross on the head, but this is a particularly nice male fire clown. He is the father of my firefly Enchi clown that everybody loves, the really bright clean one. So I used him to produce the hets with this cinnamon Mojave female. Now this is a clown, so fire might actually be a little bit more difficult to recognize in het form than it is in a clown. So let's just have a quick look at what fire looks like, some of the characteristics of fire in a non-clown. So this is a fire female, again no pastel, but you can see how bright fire is. You can see a reduced pattern, particularly towards the rear of the snake where all the alien heads tend to amalgamate, and we also get a strong dorsal stripe. Now the head stamp of fire is quite light and has a very distinctive sharp arrowhead pattern. So in this clutch there's only going to be 3 genes, fire, Mojave and cinnamon, that we need to recognize. So fire is bright, cinnamon and Mojave are both dark. In terms of pattern, Mojave tends to give these floating alien heads, but he's also a dark gene. So we've got 2 dark genes and 1 light coloured gene to try to identify. So now that we know what we're working with, let's take a look at the clutch. Alright guys, so we've got 2 egg boxes here actually. This is the clutch card, and it was a 12 egg clutch. If you remember, this was the clutch that I was going to maternally incubate, but I had to abort the maternal incubation because she laid 12 eggs all over the tub, and there were 2 rollouts immediately and 2 rollouts within the first day. So we've got 8 eggs in this egg box here, and the 4 rollout eggs are actually in a separate egg box, and we'll take a look at those in a moment. But for those of you that remember, these eggs were all over the place, embryo up, embryo down, embryo sideways. This is actually day 60, and I did do a sniff check of the incubator yesterday and noticed a slightly soapy smell, which is indicative of eggs hatching. And sure enough, these things, most of them had pipped on day 59, and you can see that on day 60 that in fact 2 of these snakes are already out. All of the eggs have all pipped all by themselves, and 2 of them are out. So the beauty of not cutting eggs and allowing them to pip by themselves is that the babies don't sit around in the eggs for days waiting to come out. They pip, and will usually within about 24 hours they're out of the egg. So if you're cutting eggs and the babies are sitting around in the egg for days, you're cutting too soon. Okay, so let's have a look at what we actually got. So what I'm looking for here are 2 dark genes, Mojave and Cinnamon, and a light gene, which is Fire. And immediately, if we zoom in here, the 2 snakes that are out, this guy here is very dark and this guy here is very light. So this guy must have Fire. So if we take a look at this light coloured guy here, very squirrely. I'm actually seeing quite a bright snake here. Woo! You see the head is quite light coloured and it has the arrow-shaped head stamp of Fire. So this is Fire, and I am seeing quite a strong alien head pattern. A nice light coloured dorsal. It's Fire that's doing that. This one, on the other hand, has a very dark head, so no Fire in this one. And you can see the alien heads are actually drawn out and extended along the length of the body. So there you go, you can see the alien heads there. So that egg there is empty. This egg here is empty. Let me just move this out to one side and we'll start to cut some of the others. I think that's probably best. So next egg, let's take this one. I'll zoom you guys in. Hopefully this clutch will be much easier to identify than the last clutch, which was the cypress clutch. So let's cut this. This is another dark one, and I'm not sure that little thing there that just dropped out is the last little bit of the umbilicus. They always have that little white knob on the end there as they absorb it into their body. So this guy is actually ready to come out of the egg already, but that's very dark. So I think that's Cinnamon. Next egg, this one has a very light coloured head, so I can already see this one has Fire in it. So let's just snip away from the head. Head's gone back in. We'll see when this one comes out of the egg. It won't be very long before they're all out anyway, so we can compare side by side. Next egg. Woo! Another Cinnamon Mojave or Savannah. You can see the joined up alien heads and the very white belly. See the joined up alien head there? That is Savannah. So that's a Savannah het clown, another Cinnamon het clown, just what we need. Next egg, let me just clean this up. It's getting a bit goopy here. There is, of course, the possibility of a normal here, and I haven't yet seen a normal. I bet there is one somewhere in here. You can see when I cut these eggs there's no blood. And in fact, if we just, let me just cut the shell open a little bit so that you can see inside. There you go, you can see there's absolutely no membrane or no blood veins at all inside these eggs. These are well ready to come out. And the dark head pops out. And the extended alien heads, that's another Savannah, Cinnamon Mojave. Okay, a couple more eggs here. We're doing well so far on the Savannahs. Not so good on the fires, only a couple of fires so far. Ooh! Now you can see the different colour on that one. That's Mojave. That's just straight Mojave. There's no cinnamon in that, I don't think. It's quite yellow there. Floating alien heads. So this is a Mojave. There we go. That's a straight Mojave. No cinnamon, no fire in that. And the last egg in this egg box. Let's try cutting through this way. Here we go. Okay, a dark head. What have we got here? Oh wow. Cinnamon Mojave, another Savannah. Alright guys, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 healthy babies there still to come out, and I'll stick those back in the incubator until they come out. And let me just zoom you in on the 2 babies that are already out and in the shedding tub. There's one dark one, which is the Cinnamon Mojave or Savannah. And there's one very light coloured one. This is the one with fire in it. So here's the other egg box. This was on the top shelf and the other egg box was on the bottom shelf, so not unusual that they take slightly different times. This is actually day 60 for these guys, and we've got no pippers, but you can see that they are extremely dimpled. And this girl laid 12 eggs. Even the first box of eggs that we cut were quite small, and these are quite small too. So I want to just help these guys out and cut them. As I said, these are the rollout eggs, and I want to show you that rollout eggs are still perfectly good. So let's cut them, see what we got, but they are quite small. So let me zoom you in here. The first rollout egg, and there is a baby snake in there. I can feel it pushing back, so let's just roll that membrane away from the eggshell. These things can't be very far away from hatching. And let's cut through. There we go, that's quite light coloured. I can't see the head, so I'm not sure. I think that may have cinnamon in it and fire, but we'll have to wait for that to come out. This is the smallest egg here. This is quite tiny, and again I can feel a baby snake inside, so let's just help it out a little bit. they're not very far away from hatching, guys. You saw there was no blood there, so let's just snip this one as well. Okay, that's quite a small snake in there, but it's fully formed. Cinnamon, perhaps. I'll have to wait for these to come out of the egg. And that's 10 eggs. We've got 2 more eggs to go and still no normals. Wow! These baby snakes in here are tiny, guys, very tiny eggs. They are perfectly formed, but just very small. So again, I'm not sure what that is. Another cinnamon fire, maybe that one. It's quite light coloured. And the last egg. Okay, this one is Mojave, I believe. Yeah, very bright dorsal there. So we have a Mojave in that one. So those are the 4 rollout eggs, guys, all perfectly okay, perfectly well formed. Just a little bit small. Alright guys, I'm going to show you something that I did yesterday. I noticed that one of the babies had not come out of the egg when all the other babies had come out. This is one of the rollout eggs, coincidentally. So a wet paper towel, and what I did was to actually go in and check the snake in the egg. I'm going to try and get close up for you here. It's actually okay to bring the snake out. But what I discovered was that this baby snake was trapped by its yolk sac here. You see the remaining yolk sac, and this was stuck to the bottom of the egg and the snake could not get out. So what I did yesterday, just to show you guys, was to perform a small procedure that will save this snake's life. Usually they will struggle to get out of the egg and quite often will die, and there is a danger that this yolk is now going rotten. You can see that it's got blood and stuff in here. So what I did was to get a small piece of dental floss, and you can see that I've tied it off there. You can see the dental floss there. I tied it just below the join to the umbilicus, where it disappears into her body. Now I didn't pull it so tight that it severed the yolk initially. I just cut off the blood supply so that this will wither away and eventually will drop off. It also prevents septicemia, because if this goes rotten, the blood supply will carry that infection into the bloodstream. So I just tied it off with an overhand knot just here, using a piece of dental floss. and I put it back into the egg to sit in the incubator, and this has been 24 hours and I can now see that this yolk sac is actually going rotten. So what I'm going to do is, now that the blood supply is restricted, I'm going to cut below where I tied off, and there should be no blood, and I'll put the snake back into the incubator until the rest of this umbilicus drops off. This snake is not particularly small and stands a very good chance of surviving. I've had snakes do this before. If you don't do this, the baby will invariably die from septicemia, as the remaining yolk sac that's not been absorbed goes rotten and poisons the baby. So let me just take the scissors, and below where I have actually tied off, I'm going to cut that yolk sac off. There you go, and you can see there was no blood. If you do that without tying off, there'll be a bunch of blood. Now you can also see the spare dental floss, and I'm going to cut that off as well. There we go. So the umbilicus is still tied off. Here you can see the remaining piece of stump of the umbilicus, but that will now heal up and drop off all by itself, and this baby is perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into the shedding tub on wet paper with the rest of the snakes, and that umbilicus will drop off all by itself. You see the snake is still active and healthy. That baby should now be fine. So that's a procedure you can do very rarely. If you notice that one of the babies has not come out of the egg, it's probably stuck in there, and the reason is that the yolk sac's not been fully absorbed and it's stuck to the wall of the egg, and the baby can't get out, and it will eventually die from struggling or from septicemia if you don't do something about it. And you can see that this is a lovely snake. It has a really nice colour and pattern. This is actually a Mojave, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to do our IDs a little bit later. Okay, so that is the now rotting remainder of the yolk sac, and we'll throw that away. Okay, so having dealt with that medical emergency, we have all 12 snakes here in this tub, and it was a 12 eggs clutch, a big female, 4 kilograms plus. She laid 12 eggs, but I'm going to say right off the bat that we're looking at some pretty tiny snakes here. 12 egg clutches are not always the best thing. If we compare these two snakes here, this is from the Cypress clutch, the last clutch to hatch, and this is from the new clutch. This is just going into shed, so it won't be too long before we can take another look at those, but just look at the difference in size. This is a 7 egg clutch, this is a 12 egg clutch, and the weight of the babies is probably about the same. So 7 babies weigh the same as these 12 babies here. So we're looking at some pretty small snakes. Okay, so here's the whole clutch now, all out of the egg, including this guy here that had the medical procedure. And we've got a bunch of snakes that look fairly similar. Let me just start pulling some of these apart so that we can see what we're dealing with. Bunch of snakes here. Okay, and you can see immediately that there is actually a bunch of very pale looking snakes. Now, it's not unusual for small snakes to colour up a lot after shed, but the difference in colour is actually quite remarkable here. We're going to have a bash at the IDs now as a preliminary, and we'll come back after shed. And IDing a clutch is supposed to be fun. This is why we do breed these snakes, and we shouldn't be afraid to get things wrong. So theoretically there were only 3 genes in this pairing: Fire, Cinnamon and Mojave. So let your eyes do the work, your brain just confuses things, so let's just work through our process, let our eyes do the work, and our brains can get on Morph Market and download photographs to our heart's content that we can compare and contrast, but your eyes don't lie. So let's let our eyes start getting to grips with what we have in this clutch. And the first thing that I'm going to try and do is to identify the base genes. We always start with the base genes and then work up, adding or stacking the other genes on top of that, so we can compare and contrast what happens when we add different genes. So immediately my eye picks out these 2 snakes here. They're quite yellowy coloured. They have a very strong yellow dorsal stripe, which is different to all the other snakes. So let's pull these guys out. So this is the guy that didn't absorb all the yolk and has the tied off umbilicus, but you can see that he is fine. The head stamps are very, very dark. You can see that both these snakes have very similar head stamps, and they both have a very similar colour. The dorsal is exactly the same colour, the head stamp is the same, and the floating alien heads is exactly the same. So you can see these very characteristic teardrop floating alien heads. So this is pretty typical of Mojave. So I'm saying 2 Mojaves. This is our base Mojave gene. I've already said we don't have a base Fire in here. So the other gene that we're looking for is Cinnamon. And Cinnamon is very dark, and this is the darkest snake of the lot out of this bunch that's left. So let's pull this guy out here. Just put these back. So you can see the difference between these 2 snakes here. This one is the Mojave, the light coloured snake with the yellow dorsal. This one is very dark. It's very cinnamon coloured. If I can get you to show you the head. The head is also very dark. You can see the chocolatey coloured dorsal stripe as opposed to the yellow stripe. We do not have the floating alien heads on this guy. This is our base Cinnamon. Very similar looking to Black Pastel. Here are the 2 base genes. This is Mojave with the nice bright yellow colours and the floating teardrop alien heads, and this is Cinnamon, the rich dark chocolatey brown colour with the chocolate coloured dorsal stripe. So what happens when we start stacking genes on top of this? Well, I don't see any other yellow coloured snakes in here, but I do see a brighter version of the same thing with a much lighter head. You can still see that we don't have the yellow dorsal stripe, but we do have a much lighter coloured head, and we also have a much reduced pattern. Very strange looking alien heads. Not Mojave alien heads, not floating, but rather running down into the belly. So this is Cinnamon Fire. This is what happens when you take cinnamon and you add fire to it. You can see the difference there in the brightness of the 2 snakes. if I can do them side by side, and you can see the difference in the colour, darkness, and the modification of the alien heads on this snake on the right, which is much lighter. And I believe that there are two of these. You can see the rich cinnamon colour in these. Again, no floating alien heads, but a very, very creamy dorsal colour, very creamy dorsal stripe. So these are two cinnamon fires. You see the light coloured head stamp there. Cinnamon fire. What happens when you take your base cinnamon and you add Mojave, this bright yellow floating alien head snake? You get this guy here. You see the floating alien heads here, but also how the alien heads run together. The dorsal stripe is a little bit lighter coloured, but looking at this guy, the head stamps are quite dark, so there's no fire in either of these. This one is cinnamon Mojave, just like Mum. This is Savannah. You see how the alien heads have all run into each other. So this is a cinnamon Mojave or Savannah, and I've just sorted the snakes out here. So these are the ones that are left. So the Savannah is very dark, obviously no fire in this one, fire being the only lightning gene. So if we just focus down on this pile here, it then becomes very easy to sort out. The light coloured ones from the dark coloured ones. So this is Savannah, this is Savannah, this is Savannah, and this is Savannah. We actually have 4 of them. And you will see they all have the dark head stamps. They all have those extended alien heads. There again you see the alien heads running into each other. So we've got 4 Savannahs. If this is Savannah, cinnamon Mojave, what happens when we add fire? We're going to make it lighter, right? We've seen that before. If you contrast the head stamps, this is cinnamon Mojave, this is cinnamon Mojave Fire with the light coloured head stamp, but you can see from the pattern we haven't done much to disrupt the pattern. You still have the cinnamon Mojave alien heads running into each other. A few drips down the side here from where fire has actually influenced the pattern, but this is basically the exact same snake, just a lighter coloured version. So Savannah or cinnamon Mojave and cinnamon Mojave Fire, the light coloured one, and you can see that we got 3 of those. So these are the fire versions of the Savannah cinnamon Mojave Fire. There are the characteristic alien heads running into each other on these guys. You can see that here. And you can see that here on this guy also. Okay, so let's see if we can just allow our eyes to do that exercise again. Mojave, Mojave. Those are the 2 yellow ones, no mistaking that. and the very dark coloured one is our base cinnamon. So 2 Mojaves, cinnamon. Let's take cinnamon and add fire. And you can see that we lighten up the head stamp, and we lighten up and make brighter the whole snake. So cinnamon, cinnamon fire, cinnamon fire. What happens when we take our cinnamon and add Mojave? Let's mix these two. So this plus this equals this. This is a cinnamon Mojave or Savannah, which is a carbon copy of Mum, and we got a bunch of those in this clutch. And if we take our cinnamon Mojave or Savannah and add fire, we get the exact same snake with a much lighter head and a much lighter colour overall. You can see this one has a little ringer here on the tail. So this is Savannah, cinnamon Mojave, and this is Savannah with fire. So cinnamon Mojave fire. Now sex ratios, guys, we've got 12 babies, and believe it or not, 4 females, 8 males. But I'm not too worried, these are all het for clown, and so the 4 females all have cinnamon in them, and we'll keep back one of the males as a quick way of getting cinnamon into our clowns as well. So there you go, a fairly straightforward process. We've got the Mojaves down here, we've got the cinnamon and the cinnamon fire, we've got the Savannahs, and the light coloured ones are the ones with fire in them. So again, guys, allow your eyes to do the work, and then your brain can go on to Morph Market and do some more comparisons. But that's a fairly straightforward identification of these babies. And remember, we started with a theoretical outcome. There are only 3 incomplete dominant genes involved in this mix, so very few combinations that they could possibly be. So that's it, that's the cinnamon Mojave clutch. Now I just want to show you this little guy that we tied off the umbilicus. You can see after 2 days the umbilicus has dropped off completely, and this baby now looks no different to any of the others in the clutch. So that procedure was a success. We managed to save this baby that was trapped in the egg. So again, that's a great outcome. So let me put these back in the hatchling rack. We'll come back after they've shed. I do expect that these fires are going to look a lot brighter after they shed, so that'll be interesting to see. But the IDs are quite straightforward, and I don't expect that that's going to change after shed, but we will come back and check anyway. Alright guys, so it looks like we managed to save that baby that was stuck in the egg. That happens once in a while, it's very rare, but if you tie off the umbilicus, the baby should be fine. And in this case, it looks perfectly healthy. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.